to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. Powered by canineprinciples.com, helping passionate dog people go from feeling unsure and overwhelmed to confident, compassionate and science savvy through a rich library of online courses and formal qualifications. Each week on the podcast, we dive deep into the real, raw and rewarding world of dogs. This isn't about obedience. This is about understanding. Because dogs aren't problems to solve. They're free-thinking, sentient beings to connect with. Hello and welcome to season 4, episode 5 of the Dog Expert podcast, where today we are joined by a really, truly inspirational guest. This lady is on a mission to help save the lives of millions and millions of dogs. And we are going to find out exactly how we can all help support this and to save these lives too. So we are going to be joined by the awesome Sindhoor Pangal. India currently has 60 to 100 million free living dogs, and they are currently at risk. So let's make a difference and let's help Sindhoor with her mission. Sindhoor is a canine behaviour consultant, a canine myotherapist, an anthrozoologist and an engineer by qualification. She researches free-living dogs in Bangalore in India and has presented her findings at major international conferences in the US, the UK, and has conducted seminars across Europe, South America. She's been invited as an expert on several podcasts, including a few on NPR radio, and maintained a weekly column on dog behaviour in the Bangalore Mirror for 2 years. She's also a TEDx speaker, and you can get her book, Dog Knows. I have a copy on the shelf. National Geographic calls hers a great mind in the bookazine Genius of Dogs. So, with no further ado, let me bring Sindhoor on. Welcome, Sindhoor.
Thank you so much for having me. I can begin to express how much this means to me and the dogs that I share my lives with. I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Oh, well, we're very grateful to you, not just for joining us today to share more information about how people can help to save these dogs' lives, but also for all the amazing work that you do. And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail as we go on in the podcast. But first of all, do you want to start by telling people a bit more about you and what inspired you to get involved in the dog world in the first place?
Yes, sure. I mean, like most of you, I think we all belong to a similar tribe in that I've loved dogs all my life. I've had dogs, and I think most of us shared sort of a common trajectory in that at some point we've come across a dog that we have struggled with, a dog that has pushed us to a point where we don't know what else to do. And we've said, okay, enough is enough. I need to get myself educated. I need to know what I'm doing here. And that has taken us down a rabbit hole, I suppose. And there has been no looking back since. It's been an incredible journey of discovery. And so it's been similar for me. I talk about this in my book. My journey started with Nishi, my boxer, who met with an accident and sort of lost half her face in the process. And to me, I really didn't know much about dogs at that time, but I knew enough to say that this is going to leave a lasting impact on her emotionally. And I need to do something about it. The vets are going to help her physically, but there is more to this. And so I started learning about dogs. And the discovery, and I loved your introduction, right? Because it's really not about obedience, because while most of the world at that time was talking about obedience, I did understand enough to say, okay, obedience is not going to help me with this problem, which is this dog who has been in and out of surgeries for more than a year, who's going to be terrified of a lot of things. I need something more than that. And that's where I started learning about dog behavior and dog emotions and dog well-being. And in a strange way, that learning journey took me to questions, took me to it was full of cognitive dissonance, as you're quite I'm sure you're familiar with that, learning things that I did not think were true. It wasn't common knowledge. A lot of things that I was learning was in direct contrast with common knowledge that I had learned on the great internet, the internet university. um, but I think the good thing is I have a learning streak in me. I'm a very curious person, and so I felt like there was a way to resolve this by going straight to the dogs and trying to figure out, what is it that I can learn from the dogs. And what's interesting about India is that in India we have free living dogs. Free living dogs are not stray dogs. They're not wild dogs. They're not feral dogs. They are dogs born on the streets and brought up by other dogs for several generations, going back to millennia. And so we have shared space with them the way I keep mentioning this, the very first, if you picture the very first human and dog and the way they evolved and they lived, we carry that legacy in India still. And those are the dogs that are around us, which also is why I feel so strongly about them. And so, being surrounded by such dogs, I realized that I could find answers to many of my questions by merely observing them, merely being more mindful of how they live their lives. Simple things like how much time do they spend moving or sleeping, to what is it they prefer eating, to what do their social structures look like, and things like that. So that's kind of has was what introduced me to my current line of work, which is looking at free living dogs and looking at the entanglements between human beings and free living dogs and how we come together as two species. That also led me to my master's in anthrozoology, because that intersection is, I think, there's no point in talking about dogs without talking about humans and vice versa. We're kind of, the two species are tied at the hips, and we became each other. We became ourselves because of each other. We kind of, I often say this, we co-became into who we are. And that has really been a magical discovery for me, because it's not just about evolution and symbiosis and things like that, but also these animals are so close to us in so many ways that when I study them, it gives me deep, deep insights into myself, into my relationship with my emotions, my struggles with my emotions, my relationships, the way I cope with challenges that come at me. And so it has made me more resilient. It has made me more compassionate towards human beings. And so there are so many life lessons that are a gift of what these dogs have given me. And today I'm lucky to say that I share my life with 3 free living dogs who were on this piece of land when I bought it. So they're not my dogs. Rather, I'm on their land, and and it's very interesting. They are free living dogs. They have like very rich lives of their own, and I get to observe them and be part of it. And I document it. So that's who I am now.
Oh, it's fascinating. So we'll come on to why the free living dog population of India is at risk and how we can help a little bit further along the line. But I'm really keen to find out, coming from a country where there are no free living dogs and where the welfare situation here in the UK is that if a dog is found on the streets, it is caught by the council and the dog wardens, and then if no rescue space or guardian comes forward to claim that dog, legally it can be euthanized after 7 days. So here we don't really see dogs on the streets at all because they're hidden away and then euthanized or rehomed, hopefully. I'd love to think that the majority are rehomed, but realistically, I know in many areas that's not the case, sadly. So what would you say are the main differences between my dog, who's currently lying spread out on the bed over there, and is completely reliant on me as his guardian to provide him with his nutrition, what that consists of, his mental stimulation, his physical stimulation, and make sure that he's got a fully enriched life. What's the difference between him and your the dogs whose land you're living on?
Yeah, my landlords.
Yeah, love that.
So the first thing I want to clarify here is many people seem to think that free living dogs are a kind of a breed unto their own, which is not true. To me, they are all dogs. The free living dogs of India do have a native landrace in them, but they're also mixed with a lot of European breeds for more than 500 years because we were colonized for a very long time. So there are many European breeds that are mixed in there. And so genetically, they are sort of the common denominator. They are the ultimate dog. They have all kinds of mixes in there. And so they make for a very interesting case study. And in addition to this, in India, we do tend to adopt these dogs as well. So my younger dog, I mentioned Nishi, but I had another dog who's of course not with me anymore, but Chiru, she used to be a street dog. She was born on the streets and orphaned, and therefore sort of put in a shelter and rescued her, and then I adopted her. And so when I see dogs that live in homes and I see dogs who live outside on the streets, I see that the difference between them is not as much genetic as it is in the way they live their lives. So Chiru, who was born on the streets, behaved more like Nishi, my boxer, rather than like Chaita, the dog that lives out here on my land. And so that kind of takes me to past that question. I think many of us get stuck on breeds and breed traits and things like that, and genetics, and we love genetics to be the single point of kind of explanation for everything that we see. But they really challenged me to say that the way they live their lives make them so different. And so what I see in the dogs that live by themselves is that they have an extraordinary ability to solve problems for themselves. They use their brains in ways that are mind-blowing. So for instance, when you talk about nutrition, I see that the dogs here are so adept at knowing what they should be eating and shouldn't be eating, what can be toxic for them. They've been alive. These dogs were here before I came here, and they spend much of their time outside, but I've never seen them eat things they should not be eating that are bad for them. They're very cautious about what they eat. Their ability to deal with, for instance, venomous animals. India being India, I live in the countryside here. We have poisonous snakes, we have scorpions, we have all kinds of creepy crawlies that can bite you and get to give you hallucinations and kill you and so on and so forth. And they know what to approach and what not to approach. They've never been bitten by a snake. They're alive. And we have cobras and vipers here. So they seem to manage quite well. Despite that, they know what to, for instance, zoopharmy, right? The pharmacies that nature has within itself. Many animals have shown the ability to utilize this kind of a pharmacy, and these dogs demonstrate an ability to do that as well. And they, when we talk about enrichment, for example, when we deal with enrichment for our companion dogs, in my mind, they're more of captive dogs. And so when we deal with enrichment for captive dogs, they have so little understanding of regulation. So you could get dysregulated in the process of getting enrichment. And how do you bring yourself back to a sense of regulation? How do you say, I've partied enough and I need to take a break now. I need to, and this is how I regulate myself. This is how I co-regulate myself. This is how I use individuals other than me to bring myself back down. This is a necessary timeout for me. For instance, they know when to stop play. They know how not to go overboard. They know how to take necessary breaks. So I think they have this extraordinary wisdom that, when I think about it, all animals should actually have all of this, and there's no reason why dogs shouldn't. And they display that, yes, we are capable of this as a species. And it makes me wonder, when we take away agency from them, when we don't give them opportunities to discover for themselves, but also get mentored by other dogs, get mentored by other conspecifics who are wiser than them in their own craft, I think that can make them less independent, and less independent in the corollary of that would be more dependent. So they're constantly depending on us for everything, which can also get very overwhelming for us. I think we don't know how to dog. We are not experts on dog. We don't know we don't even know how to human. We are quite bad at figuring out how to manage our own emotions, our own diet, our own physical well-being. Most of us don't do very well on that. I certainly don't. And so making me responsible for these creatures, and I'm like, I'm not so sure I'm doing the right thing. But when I observe these dogs and I see what they're doing, to me, it's such a gem, because I'm like, okay, maybe I should be doing more of that. And I've never been wrong with those observations. Like every single time I made an observation and said, maybe I should be doing more of that, they've been kind of right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a book by Mark Beckoff and Jessica Pierce called A Dog's World, where they hypothesize about how, if all the humans suddenly disappeared, which dogs would actually adapt and evolve, and if they were currently left abandoned with no humans. And I think it says in there that it's like about 80%.
Yeah, 70 to 80%.
In there, yeah, of the world's dogs already live as free ranging or street dogs. So that, my dog, being a completely pampered pooch who loves to bury himself under the duvet every morning and gets a strop of his dinner as 5:05 instead of 5 o'clock, that is completely not the case for those sort of 75
Yeah.
to 80.
Yeah, it's quite hard to estimate the population of free-living dogs, but yes, the estimate is somewhere between 70 to 80% of the world's dogs are free-living dogs, which kind of begs the question, in so many of people's minds, the idea of a dog, the picture of a dog is a companion dog or a captive dog inside a household, but that is really the least of representation. Bulk of dogs live the way Chaita and family here live. They're, by the way, inside the house right now because they're very good at figuring out that it's getting cold outside. Can we come and crash inside?
I love that. We've got the lovely Penny backstage now. Penny, how's your internet today? Because we've had challenges.
I think we're vastly better. It just took me a minute to sort something out.
Oh, I'm so glad you could make it. There is about a 3-second delay, but hopefully it won't impact us too much. Sindhoor's just been telling us all about the amazing work that she does over in India, and we're just coming on to the bit that I know you were excited about, Penny, which is the street dogs, how we can actually help to save their lives, because at the moment there's some terrible stuff going on and we want to help and we want to support, as I know all of our listeners will. Can you explain to us a bit more, Sindhoor, about what's going on so that we can champion what you're doing and get the word out there?
Yes. So just to give context, like I mentioned, India has had free living dogs forever. And I say forever because even our old ancient mythology has mention of free living dogs. And so we really go back a long time. And we have coexisted and known how to coexist all along, both the dogs and the humans. However, the practice of seeing them as animals that don't belong in the space is something that started around the time of the British. And so there was a mass culling campaign that happened for almost 100 years. And the reason I mention this is because during that period, if there's one thing that we learned through data, is that in a country like India, achieving a dog-free environment is not possible, because after 100 years of the British government trying to cull these dogs and kill them, the dogs never went away. They're still around. And in the late 1950s, early 60s, they started efforts to get this on data, to look at if these practices are effective in any way. And it was shown through data that this way of trying to remove these dogs, not only does it not make a difference to the number of dogs, but it also doesn't reduce rabies and dog bite instances, both of which are very important concerns, very human concerns, because the ones who get impacted are the most vulnerable part of society, and that data has to be looked at. However, at that time, what was also demonstrated, and I think this was a 3-decade-long study, and so what's demonstrated is there is a way to address rabies and bite numbers, which is through what is called the CNVR program, which is Catch, Neuter, Vaccinate, Release. So CNVR, and the significant aspects of this neuter and release along with vaccinate is what is the magic formula here. Because when we neuter these animals, the population kind of stabilizes. We don't have a shifting population. And thus, we are able to achieve 70% vaccination coverage with these dogs, which creates herd immunity in the population for a disease like rabies, which is very critical. And they form a buffer zone around us with vaccinated animals around us. And as long as there are dogs around us, they do not permit too many other animals coming in. Now, what happens when you start removing these dogs, and this is why the culling and killing and all of that and removal of these dogs is hugely problematic not just from animal welfare perspective, but also from a One Health and human health perspective, public health perspective, is when you start removing these dogs, every ecosystem has the ability to support a certain amount of life, which is called the holding capacity of that ecosystem. And so if you suck away life very rapidly, there's going to be new life that kind of moves in to occupy that space. And in India, the biggest challenge that we have, and the reason you don't see this in, for instance, the countries in the West, is that in India, we have a huge problem with garbage disposal. We are unable to dispose the garbage that we have. We don't know what to do about it. We're still struggling with it. And so that forms the ability to support life in our urban ecosystems. And we have to take cognizance of that. Without removing that, if you just remove the dogs, guess what moves in to occupy that space? It's going to be rodents, rats, mongooses, so on and so forth. And along with them come the snakes. India loses 50,000 lives per year to snake bites. So it's not a trivial thing. We have a lot of venomous snakes in the country, not just in wild parts, but I used to live in Bangalore city, which is considered the Silicon Valley of India, and it's posh with all the IT companies, and we have all these fancy villas and things like that. And I had a snake in one of those villas at one point. So it's not something to be taken lightly. So, and the rodents come in, they carry diseases as well, not only rabies, but leptospirosis and plague as well. And so we have had instances where bubonic plague has been on the rise because of sudden removal of dogs. And they can expose us to novel viruses as well. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, because novel virus is really the scary part, and the part that I really want to discuss with you, because it can have far-reaching consequences to the entire world. But along with this, what also happens is, in a slightly longer time span, the dog population also returns, because, like you mentioned, we have anywhere between 60 million to 100 million dogs in India. So nobody is going to be able to remove all of them overnight. And so if you remove these dogs, there are going to be new dogs. And we know that when you distress a population, they reproduce faster. And so new dogs are going to come in eventually to occupy that space. And every single time we have attempted to remove these dogs, the population that re-emerges is close to twice the number of what was earlier there. And these are new dogs, they're unvaccinated dogs, they're unfamiliar with the environment. And so there's a high risk of conflict among the dogs and bite, and which can spill over to human beings. So this is the landscape, right? This is the landscape that we live in. There are no quick solutions. We can't follow Western models, and we can't model our cities on Western cities. That's not really possible. We have to reimagine something that would work for countries like India. And it's not just India, because like you mentioned, 70 to 80% of the dogs in the world are free living dogs. So this is a conversation that we need to have for many parts of the global south and many parts of the world, really. And so taking cognizance of this, based on good science and based on WHO recommendation of the right way of achieving population control, CNVR was the recommendation which was being followed in India. We have laws for it in India. The dogs are governed by certain laws. I mean, how we deal with the dogs are governed by certain laws. Now, in August of last year, the Supreme Court decided to, a 2-member bench, which then moved on to 3-member bench, decided to take up this case and recommend that dogs be removed from New Delhi. And they went on to say dogs be removed from the entire country in certain parts. So about 10% of the population is what they want to remove and put them in shelters. And this was done on a suo motu action. A suo motu action is one where there wasn't really a case per se that they reacted to. They just decided one morning, hey, let's do this. 2 people decided, let's do this. And they consulted no domain experts. They disregarded all the science there is to it and said, hey, move the dogs to shelters. And one of the first things that we went and asked them is, okay, but where are the shelters? They don't exist. 10% of 60 million dogs is still 6 million dogs. Where are the shelters for 6 million dogs? And if you have money to construct them, why don't you give it to the people of India? It's not like we're very wealthy. This is a country that needs that. But all of that was disregarded, and we've been having hearings on this for several months now. It's still in court. The case is still being discussed in court. There have been a lot of petitioners. Interestingly, the judges themselves commented that they've not seen so many petitioners in a case, even cases that have to do with human beings. But the dogs, we've had the best lawyers in the country, absolutely the top lawyers in the country, the celebrity lawyers and the senior most lawyers, all of them arguing in favor of dogs pro bono, which tells you that this is also against the sentiment of the country. This is not what we want. This is not what most normal people want. There are a few who are bloodthirsty and just want to see the dogs dead. But and that those few are the problem, because while this is being heard out in court and there has not been a decision yet, there have been people who have decided to take matters into their own hands and start culling them, killing them, and stuffing birth control centers, animal birth control centers with these dogs. And so birth control has come to a halt in many places, which is a huge risk again. And like I mentioned, when you start removing these animals, rodents can come and occupy that space. Now, this is very scary because rodents can possibly carry not just diseases, zoonotic diseases, but also novel diseases. Novel diseases is extremely scary because they are diseases for which we do not have vaccines developed. We don't know how these diseases spread. We don't know much about them. And the last time we had a novel zoonotic disease spread from rodents to human beings, that should be very fresh in our memory, that was COVID. Right? COVID came from bats, which is bats are rodents too. And one of the biggest challenges with COVID was that it was a novel disease. We didn't know anything about that disease, and it took us so long to figure out what to do about it. And consider that India is an antibiotic resistant country. Human beings here have a high degree of antibiotic resistance, which means that we have the ability to incubate superbugs. And we are in the global south, which means we have, because of climate change, we have a lot of climate catastrophes like flooding and things like that, which also exacerbates the conditions for incubation of diseases. And add to that this idea of mass shelters. We all know that shelters can be hotbeds for diseases, for zoonotic diseases. You can see why, as a scientific community, we are terrified of this move, and why we are reaching out to people all over the world to say this is not just a us problem. We may just give this problem to you in the form of the next horrible epidemic of sorts. And so this is something that we really need to take cognizance of. And mind you, in all of this, I haven't even spoken about animal welfare.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy that this day and age where we kind of think we're finally making headway with more welfare-centric approaches, and then something like this happens. And then like in Morocco with the FIFA World Cup in 2030, they've decided they're culling the street dogs over there, and in the most inhumane ways possible, when you've got the CNVR method there that could be used. And then you've got the problems with rabies, and that's not just a problem with the dogs. Like then you've got someone being bitten by a dog that's got rabies, and then that becomes a problem for the humans as well. So I mean, Penny, you must have a bit to say on this. I know that this is something that you'll feel really strongly about, and I could see that when Sindhoor was talking about the ecosystems, for example, that's right up your street, isn't it?
It's ridiculous that we can get to this stage in history and not have learned from the disastrous times of attempting to do the same thing before. I mean, you've got the British government making the same error, thinking that they can eradicate badgers, thinking that badgers carry bovine TB. And every time you remove a badger, another badger moves in, because the ecosystem is designed to be interconnected with all the life forms there, all playing a role in their ecosystem that contributes symbiotically to each other. And if you make a void, something will move in. Equally, the Australian government, in its infinite wisdom back in the day, said, right, we have this invasive species of beetle that are eating all the sugarcane up in the north of in Queensland. Again, one of those places where the weather and the tropical conditions are rife for these kind of growth explosions, right? And they said, the brilliant idea would be to bring in a cane toad. A cane toad will come and eat the cane beetle, and then we'll get rid of that. And now Australia has an incredible cane toad population because it's poisoning all the native marsupials, all the animals that live that don't have disease resistance to the poison of a cane toad. Every time we meddle, we wreck it. If we could take a leaf literally out of nature's book and copy to say, how do you actually work? And how can I then harness that for good instead of try and break the system and come in with an anthropogenic solution that doesn't have the backing of evidence, doesn't have the backing of history, like proof in the pudding, doesn't have the correct voices being brought in. And so as we just rightly point out, it's the animals that suffer initially. But the ecosystem also breaks, and so do the humans. And you've illustrated that perfectly with the ascent of, someone's going to move in this case, rodents and then snakes. And then you've got potential for the plague, because, we all know that from the Black Plague across Europe in the 1600s or 1300s, whatever it was, it was the fleas on the rats, And so what do? We're just repeating history from 1,000 years ago. We thought we'd be a bit more smart by now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it just seems like a hamster wheel that just keeps revolving round and round and round, and the poor hamster's stuck on the wheel, and we just keep repeating the same mistakes.
Yeah. And dogs in India, and this is kind of what I wish there was a way to get this into people's minds, is dogs in India play such a critical role, because in the case of dogs, all you need to do is flash a smile at the dog on 2 days, and by third day, he comes running up to you. You can catch him, you can vaccinate him, you can neuter him, and you can do whatever is required to create make the population healthy, at least towards humans. So it is a very anthropocentric view, but still, make sure that there are no zoonotic diseases coming in. You break that buffer, and you're not going to be able to catch all the rats and vaccinate them. That's not happening. And in a country like India, where we have so many different kinds of animals, so I live on a farm here. If you start removing these animals, I'm going to have wild boars coming in, I'm going to have snakes coming in. And if you look at the Nilgiris biosphere, which is from the neighboring state here, they have managed to get rid of many of their dogs. And so they don't talk about a dog menace anymore. But guess what? They're now talking about a bear menace. They're talking about a panther menace. My friend points at the golf course and she says, this is where we have a tiger menace. Right? When people are not able to handle dogs, best of luck handling tigers. And she talks about a panther, not somewhere else. She's like, oh, this neighbor's house, last week they had a panther in the house. And I asked her, what did you do about it? They don't know what to do about it. They're running after the monkeys and the panthers and the bears with air guns, and they don't have money to buy enough bullets. So they're putting peppercorns in the air guns and shooting at these animals. Like, I can't make up this stuff, right? It is so ridiculous. And the answer was always so simple all along, which is that these dogs not only create a buffer zone around us for zoonotic diseases, but also mitigate human-wildlife conflict. But in the process of mitigating human-wildlife conflict, there is going to be conflict between wildlife and dog, and hyper-focusing on that and saying, oh, they're harming our wildlife. No, they're not. If you took the dogs away, we would be the ones harming the wildlife, and the wildlife would be hurting us. And they're going to be bringing in diseases from the forest that we've never had exposure to, and we are going to be gifting them diseases. I think we did have a case of snow leopards coming in and eating chicken from the farm and dying of a disease because they're not used to our garbage and the diseases that we carry. And so we're going to kill off our wildlife, and we're going to permit them to harm us. And the dogs were always there, putting their bodies on the line. This is the role that they have played ever since they became the species. Their role was to create that buffer space between humans and other animals. And when we take that away, a country like India is going to feel it very sharply. We seem to be completely oblivious of that.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask if the government put a time frame on this.
Well, I wish the government put something specific. So like I said, they're still debating. So they came initially and they said something like 6 weeks, which was ludicrous. Nothing in India gets built in 6 weeks, not a single room, let alone shelters all across the country. And then came all the petitions, which kind of moved them on the back foot. That's also kind of why I'm here, because I think it's possible for international pressure to continue to move them on the back foot. So they've not put a timeline on this. They're now deliberating on it. Which is a good thing. However, what kind of bothers me, and which is why I'm kind of appealing to everybody, is that people have taken matters into their own hands, and they're not skilled people. They get off-season mine workers to come in and start catching these dogs and killing them in the most barbaric ways possible, burning them, burying them alive, like all kinds of things that are happening to thousands of dogs, simply because the Supreme Court has shown their tendency to want to tolerate such action, right? They've not said anything yet, but they have made it quite clear that this is the direction that they are tending towards. And it's interesting that you bring Morocco into the picture, right? Because one of the things I was talking to the people working in Morocco, which was brought up, is along with animal issues here, for instance, children are witnessing this terrible violence towards animals. We're normalizing this. It's traumatizing them. And who are we shaping them to be? This is the next generation. Who are we shaping them to be? In India, most of the people who care for the street dogs, they call themselves feeders, and there are many, many, many people of that kind in India, and most of them are women. And so there's also a sudden increase in violence towards women. And this is what our next generation is witnessing. It's okay to harm women. It's okay to harm animals. We are imbibing, infusing violence into them, which I think is the scarier part of the story, really, for me.
That's so
it really
true.
is. Sorry, Penny, you go.
Violence begets violence. And we've seen that not just in that direct correlation that you're talking about here, where it's the women who are caretaking, therefore in a vulnerable position where vigilantes are coming along to perpetrate such heinous acts. But you also then, as you say, indoctrinate a generation into violence is acceptable, violence is sanctioned. Anyone who's smaller than you, weaker than you, more vulnerable, anyone who you find annoying, like it opens the floodgates of permissive behavior to then be perpetrated on a cultural scale. And we've all seen the correlations between, people. It's almost cruelty to animals is a starting drug, if you like, a gateway drug to then domestic abuse and other catastrophes in society. So there's not one single aspect of this multifaceted story that you're explaining to us that has any redemption in it at all. It's negative on every possible level. It just explodes the mind as you try and think of how that could be justified.
Yeah, so it's not just Sorry, I just want to add this.
You go.
It's not just normalizing violence. I think there are two facets to that. One is normalizing violence, but also discouraging compassion. So making compassion feel like it is shameful. It needs to be hidden. It's something you shouldn't be doing, especially shouldn't be doing in public. So a lot of people say, if you like the dogs so much, take them into their homes. And the question I ask is, why is that my act of compassion should be hidden away inside closed doors as a shameful act, whereas your act of violence, exploitation and extraction can be done openly in public? This is what you're shaping the world to be. So sorry, I interrupted you because I think I feel so strongly about this.
No, I'm glad. I was just thinking about children just on their way to school, just literally going about their day-to-day life. And by the time they've arrived at school, they've seen such horrific acts of violence and potentially their mothers being abused verbally, physically. It's just horrific, it really is. But how can we help? We want to help, but how can Penny and I and our listeners, how can we help?
Yeah. So I've been talking a lot on a lot of podcasts about this, and so this is a rapidly developing situation. There's constantly, we're at different phases of it, and so the need of the hour would change based on when somebody is listening to it. So as a listener, what we need today is going to be different from what we need tomorrow. So if you're listening to this at a later point of time, please come back and check on our social media. We will at that time be talking about what we need then. But where we are today, I think one of the most critical things really is being aware of this, right? The international discourse shapes so much of what happens in India. And so I think just being aware of this matters a lot, but also talking about it. So talking about it on social media, but also if there's anybody who can print this for us, if there's anybody with a louder voice, anybody that writes for magazines or anything, getting the story out there. And not just getting the story out there as a sensationalist thing, but getting it out there with a firm understanding of this. My hope is, if there's a silver lining in all of this, is that this conversation about understanding the vacuum effect, the rebound effect, the impact on society, so on and so forth, this nuance is now beginning to be understood by more and more people. And I would like that to spread more. So talk about it more, appeal to people to talk about it, appeal to people who have a bigger audience, draw their attention towards this. Either if you see content on my site or anybody, there are so many people in India writing about this. So draw their attention to newspaper articles about this. I know, for instance, the BBC has written a little bit about it, but it's really interesting. The New York Times and the BBC both did articles on this, but they did not acknowledge this nuance of it. So they chose to take a stance that made it look like India is finally getting its act together and wanting to get rid of the dogs, and finally wanting, getting the idea that they have to not have these dogs, without understanding that how catastrophic even attempting that can be. Not that it'll ever be achieved, but even attempting that can be catastrophic for human lives, and complete disregard for that understanding. So pushing the right narrative in all those places, I think, makes a big difference. And of course, if there is, I do ask people of this. So if there are Indian officials, Indian origin officials in your governments, you can write to them to draw their attention to it. You can write to organizations like, for instance, WOA, World Organization for Animal Health, and any contacts within any of those places to draw their attention to this, to say this is concerning for all of us. Even if none of that can be done, just being aware of it, and this is why I say this repeatedly, you have no idea how much this matters to me. The fact that somebody heard me out all this way, you stuck to this and you listen to the whole thing, I think that in itself can be tremendously useful. Don't take your eyes off us. Don't forget us. It's not just a story that's unraveling in some part of the world and we see it for a moment, we rage over it for a moment and get done with it. Stick with it, gain nuance. I'm guessing most of your audience are professionals who have a deeper understanding of things, and so do justice to that knowledge that you have and really apply your brains and understand this. It's not a clickbaity thing, it's more than that.
And if people want to keep abreast of the most current situation so that they're informed when they're contacting people and reaching out to people, or just for themselves so that they're up to date, where's the best place for them to either connect with you directly or to see online?
So we are on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook. I was asked to get on X as well. So, we are on a lot of those platforms under Barks Education. So you'll find us there. And our website, I have a special section on the website just to focus on this topic. I've been adding all the news articles there. We have some pretty good literature that has been written, co-authored by the scientists who've been working on this to give a nuanced understanding of this. And so if there are any new developments, I kind of keep updating that as well. So you can reach out to us. We also collaborate with other accounts that are spreading information on this. So you can also look at those accounts and just once you start searching and reading, you will go down that rabbit hole. You'll find more people, so you can stay on top of all of that.
Fantastic. And just to be clear on the spelling of Barks, it's B for Bravo, HARCS for Sierra.com. And when you go on to the Barks.com website, if you go to more on the menu options, you'll see a tab called Removal of Free Living Dogs, and all of the information's on there. So please do reach out, keep an eye on what's going on. If you've got any questions or anything that you want to ask, please do pop them in the comments in the chat and let us know. Penny, have you got any last parting words before we let Sindhoor go?
Just to thank you for the dedication and the storytelling that you're bringing to this. I mean, not every story is a happy story, but to be able to communicate that so coherently so that people can really picture how things are unfolding there, but to also bring in some of those lighter or brighter sparks where we say, well, look at the advantages as well. Look at the cultural transmission that dogs are having with each other, and that they can use their innate skills as being friendly with humans to soften the impact in some ways, in the ways that they can educate each other to thrive in that environment, so that the other dogs are all going to lift up to a certain standard. So there are beautiful aspects to this species that you've highlighted, despite the fact that they're submerged almost in this, nightmare situation where their welfare is hanging by a thread, and we need to be really bringing, pots and pans and banging for the attention of the world to stand behind man's best friend.
Yeah. So, I'm going to, since you mentioned this, I'm going to give you something really hopeful that comes out of this, right? For me, we have spoken about the horrific things that people do to dogs. We have spoken about all the bad aspects of this. But like I said, the number of people who have come out there to fight for these dogs that they don't own, dogs that are considered by most people wretched and dirty, but the number of people who are putting their bodies on the line, have been protesting since August, have put their lives on hold, people who barely have means for themselves. These are not the rich and the wealthy, but people who have to show up for a job, who are stressed to no end, but continue to show up for these animals. I think these animals are shining a light on the brighter side of what it means to be human beings. As of today, we look at all the things that are happening out there in the world, and it's easy to feel very disheartened about who we are as a species. But I think these dogs are shining a light on who we can be as a species. We are capable of this too. We are capable of, no other species has the ability to do this, which is, put their own lives on the line to fight a battle for another that they don't get anything from in terms of what the world appreciates, nothing monetary, none of that, but to still do that. That is the brightest part of us within us here. And the dogs are shining a light on that. So yeah, there you go.
You are really inspirational. Truly inspirational. Thank you so much. We are fresh out of time already. I did say before we came on air, we just always seem to run out of time, and it goes so quickly. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will keep championing the work that you're doing. Thank you, Sindhoor. Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Dog Expert podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. If you've enjoyed this episode, do come and let us know in our free Facebook group for dog lovers everywhere, Ethical Dog Training with Canine Principles. That way we can make more content like this that you'll love. We would love for you to leave a review on here and hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode.